There was an extra bag. I stood by the front door, staring at it. It wasn't there yesterday. And I know because I vacuumed the hallway. Twice. She always travels with one carry-on. Maybe a backpack if it's more than 3 days. But this? This was new. Matte black, unfamiliar brand. Lock on the zipper. I asked her about it. She looked at it for a second like she'd never seen it before. Then she smiled. Oh, Ainsley had extra stuff. She left it with me for now. But Ainsley lives 30 minutes away. Why would she give her suitcase to someone else, instead of just taking it home? Marla didn't wait for me to respond. She walked into the kitchen and started unloading avocados. We didn't eat avocados. She knew I hated them. That was the second weird thing. The third came 3 hours later, when I went to take the trash out and saw her digging a hole in the backyard. It was already dark. She was barefoot in the cold grass, wearing her robe. I thought maybe she lost something. But when I asked what she was doing, she froze. Then smiled again. I wanted to replant the rosemary. I read it does better when it's buried deeper. We don't grow rosemary. We've never grown anything. She came inside like nothing happened. Her feet left muddy prints all the way to the hallway, right past that locked suitcase. That night, I waited for her to fall asleep. At 2:13 a.m., she finally did. I know the time exactly because I watched the clock while her breathing slowed. I crept into the hallway. My heart was in my throat, palms sweaty. The suitcase was still there. I crouched beside it, careful not to make the floor creak. The lock wasn't fancy. I could break it if I really wanted to. But something about it felt sacred, like whatever was inside wasn't mine to know. Or maybe I was scared it was. I listened, and I swear to God, I heard something shift inside. Not heavy, not sharp, but deliberate, like movement. I stood up, backed away, almost tripped on the shoes she never wears. The next morning, it was gone. I asked her where the bag went. She sipped her tea and said, "What bag?" I laughed, thinking she was joking. But her face didn't change. There was no bag, no hole in the backyard, no muddy prints. But I remember. And that was just the beginning. The bag was gone, but the scent remained. It wasn't perfume. It wasn't food. It was something thick and ancient, like wet stone and ash, like a fireplace that hadn't been used in years suddenly roaring to life. Every room she walked into, it lingered behind her for a few seconds too long. She didn't seem to notice it, or if she did, she pretended not to. By Thursday, I started keeping a notebook. I didn't tell her. I kept it taped to the underside of the bathroom sink behind the pipe where she wouldn't look. I wrote everything down: the bag, the hole, the rosemary lie, the smell, the noise from the suitcase. I needed proof that these things had happened, even if no one else saw them. Because I was starting to question my own grip on reality. And not in a dramatic, movie kind of way. In the quiet kind, where you're folding laundry and suddenly forget how you got into the room. She wasn't acting distant, like people say in bad relationship posts. She was watching. Not constantly, but waiting. Her silence started to feel like she was giving me space just to observe how I'd use it. Like a scientist leaving a rat in a maze to see which dead end it would run into first. On Friday, something changed again. I came home early from work. I didn't warn her. No text. No call. I just walked in the door at 4:07 p.m. and I wished to God I hadn't. She was in the living room. Not sitting, standing. Still. Eyes closed. Facing the window. And her mouth was moving. No sound came out. But her lips were forming something rhythmic. Like a prayer or a chant. Over and over. I didn't make a sound. I watched from the hallway. She did it for at least another 30 seconds before she suddenly snapped out of it and turned around like she knew I was there. "Hey," she said brightly. "You're home early." She blinked a few times. Fast. Like she'd just come out of a trance. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. And for a single, awful second, I swear they weren't even her eyes. Something behind them flickered. Too sharp, too aware, too old. I mumbled something about a canceled meeting and went straight to the bedroom. I didn't eat dinner that night. Just sat on the edge of the bathtub with the notebook in my hands, rereading what I'd written, trying to figure out if I was being haunted, manipulated, or going quietly insane. Saturday morning, I opened our shared laptop to check email. We rarely used it, but we had a synced browser history. I wasn't snooping, at least not at first. I was looking for a confirmation from our plumber. But something caught my eye, a search from 3 days ago. How to remove scent from bones. I froze. There were others. How deep can you bury something before dogs detect it? How to tell if you're being followed. How long before someone forgets a dream. I sat back, heartbeat in my ears. Then I clicked the bookmarks tab. She'd saved a page, only one. It was a forum thread. Old, mostly archived. Titled, "If They Come Back Different, Signs, Symptoms, Precautions." The site was buried under layers of spam and pop-ups. But the contents were still there. Bullet points. Lists. Testimonies. Paranoia. The eyes are the first to go. They'll try to act like they remember you. Don't believe them. Don't speak your real name around them. Don't eat what they cook. If they laugh in their sleep, it's already too late. That last one hit me like a hammer to the chest. I clicked the username of the original poster, but it led to nothing. Account deleted. Date, 2014. I closed the laptop and sat very still. That night, I woke up gasping. She was standing next to the bed. Just standing, looking down at me. In the dark. Her voice was calm. "You were having a nightmare," she whispered. I didn't remember dreaming. I didn't remember anything at all. She reached out to touch my face. Her hand was ice cold. It took me 2 full days to admit the bag wasn't coming back. Not because I believed Marla when she said it never existed. I didn't. But because some part of me hoped that if I just stayed quiet, it would reappear. That it would let me pretend everything was still logical, explainable. But it didn't. The bag vanished like it had never been there. And the space in the hallway where it sat felt louder than anything she said to me that week. She started speaking in shorter sentences. No contractions. Almost like English was her second language. "I will make dinner. You should rest now. I will clean the kitchen." Simple things, delivered in a tone that lacked all rhythm. Like someone who had heard the melody of normal life, but couldn't quite hum it back. I began noticing other oddities, tiny but sharp. She never used the bathroom when I was around. She stopped taking showers at regular times. She started locking the door while brushing her teeth. Who locks a door to brush their teeth? She also unplugged every electronic in our bedroom. Said something about electromagnetic fields and sleep, but we've had the same setup for 5 years. Now the alarm clock was gone. Her phone never charged in the room. There was only silence, darkness, and her breathing at night. Except one night, there wasn't even that. I woke up at 3:04 a.m. because I didn't hear her breathing. I reached over to her side of the bed. It was cold. Not like she'd just gotten up. Cold like she hadn't been there for hours. I walked through the house barefoot. No lights on. No sound. I stood in the kitchen doorway for a long time, not even sure what I was waiting for. Then I noticed it. The back door was slightly open. Not swung wide, just ajar. Enough for air to creep in. I stepped outside, heart in my throat. The backyard looked still, like a painting. But then I saw a movement near the old shed we never use. A silhouette. Just for a second. Then nothing. I didn't call her name. I don't know why. I just stood there, half in the doorway, trying to breathe. The moon was bright enough to show footprints in the dirt, fresh, pointed inward, toward the shed. I counted 3 sets. 3 different treads. She came back inside 5 minutes later, holding her robe shut with both hands like she'd been caught doing something shameful. Her hair was damp. Not wet, not sweaty. Damp, like she'd been near water. I asked her what she was doing, and she said without blinking, "I was taking a walk." Then she smiled, kissed me on the cheek, and said, "You worry too much, Hal." She hadn't called me Hal in years. Everyone calls me Henry. Except my mother. Marla had never once called me Hal in our entire relationship. Later that day, I checked the shed. It was locked, old padlock covered in rust. Same as always. But there were scuff marks on the dirt around it, like someone had tried to drag something heavy out, then back in again. A shovel leaned against the fence, one we never use. And taped to the inside of our mailbox, folded into a tight square, was a piece of paper with a list written in pencil. Do not follow. Do not question. Do not answer the door after 2 a.m. Do not eat the red berries. Do not open the bag until it stops moving. No name. No explanation. No context. Just the list, waiting in the mailbox like someone wanted me to find it and forget it all at the same time. That night, she made dinner. I didn't eat. She asked why. I told her I wasn't feeling well. She smiled and said, "You'll adjust soon." Adjust to what? I checked her phone while she was in the shower. Or, at least, pretending to be. New passcode. No texts. No photos. No call log. Nothing in her gallery except one new album named Moss. It had a single image. It was pitch black. But when I turned the brightness all the way up, I could just barely make out something in the corner. A blurred shape. Something twisted and wrong. It looked like it had fingers, too many. I deleted it immediately, then turned off the phone and placed it back exactly where I found it. My hands didn't stop shaking for 10 minutes. Something was happening. I just didn't know if it was happening to her or to me. I used to think I understood the layout of my own house. I know that sounds stupid. We've lived here 6 years. I've painted these walls, hung photos, replaced floorboards with my own hands. But lately, I've started getting the feeling that the house has been rearranged slightly. Not the furniture, something subtler. The angles, the shadows, like the house was mimicking itself and getting it almost right. It started with the hallway near the guest bedroom. I always thought it was 12 steps from the bathroom to the coat closet. I counted once when I was sick with food poisoning, crawling to get a blanket. But last week I counted again, and it was 13. I did it again, barefoot, in silence. Still 13. The hallway wasn't longer. The floor was longer. Like the wood itself had stretched when I wasn't looking. The next morning, I heard scratching behind the walls. Not mice, something heavier. Slower. It wasn't skittering. It was dragging. I pressed my ear to the drywall, right behind the bed. Nothing at first. Then a faint clicking, like someone was flicking their nail against a pipe, waiting for me to respond. I stayed frozen for 20 minutes. When I finally moved, my ear was ice cold. I didn't tell Marla. She had started humming. Not music. She never really sang. This was different. Tuneless. Like the whine of an old fridge trying to hold a note. She'd do it when she was stirring tea, brushing her hair, standing by the window, and not blinking. Always the same 3-tone hum, rising just enough to get inside my skull. Once I asked her what the tune was, and she tilted her head like she didn't understand the question. Just filling the silence, she said, and then asked if I wanted to go out for berries. We don't eat berries. I'm allergic, and she knows that. I started sleeping in the living room. I didn't explain it. I just grabbed my pillow one night after she whispered something in her sleep that didn't sound like English. I told myself it was for better rest, that I was snoring, that she'd understand. But she didn't ask questions, didn't fight it. She just stared at me from the top of the stairs as I walked away, like she knew this was inevitable. 3 nights ago, I woke up gasping. Not from a nightmare, from a sound. Inside the wall. Louder this time. A wet, snapping sound. And breathing. Too deep to be hers. I grabbed the flashlight and moved the old bookshelf away from the wall. Behind it, the wallpaper was peeled back like something had pushed from inside. There was a vent I'd never noticed, square, low to the floor. The cover was loose. It looked like it had been unscrewed and then reattached with trembling hands. I pulled it off, heart pounding. Inside was a cavity, deeper than it should have been. There was no duct, no insulation, just open blackness. And something else. A flash drive, wrapped in red thread, like someone had tried to protect it. Or warn me. I didn't plug it in right away. I stared at it for hours. Sat on the floor with it in my palm, feeling the weight like it was heavier than plastic should be. The thread smelled like smoke. Not fire smoke, like ritual smoke. I don't even know what that means, but that's what it was. Eventually, curiosity won. I used my old work laptop. No Wi-Fi. No Bluetooth. No microphone. I took it out to the shed in the middle of the night, locked the door, and sat beneath the single flickering bulb like I was about to do something illegal. The drive had one folder. No name. Inside, 3 video files and a text document called If Found, Don't Watch Twice. I opened the text file first. It was short. She came back with different bones. She wears her old skin well, but the movements are off. She doesn't blink when you do. She watches the wrong things. If you're reading this, they're already inside your house. The walls are thinner than they look. I nearly dropped the laptop. I opened the first video. It was shaky, recorded on a phone, looked like a hotel room. Low light. A woman stood in the center, back to the camera. Pale arms. Long black hair. No sound. Then, slowly, her head turned. All the way around. No cracking. No screaming. Just a 180 degrees rotation, staring directly at the lens. Then the screen cut to black. I didn't watch the other 2. I ejected the drive and smashed it with a hammer in the driveway until it cracked open like a beetle's shell. The plastic snapped, but even then, I thought I heard it make a sound. A gasp, like it hurt. The next morning, Marla didn't speak a word. She just placed a fresh cup of tea in front of me and smiled. Then she leaned down and whispered, "You weren't supposed to see it yet." I hadn't slept in 2 nights. Not really. I dozed in 20-minute bursts and jolted awake each time with the taste of soil in my mouth. I started keeping a notebook beside the couch to track these micro-dreams. I wrote down things I saw: trees bending backward, a face watching me from inside the refrigerator door, a voice reciting numbers through the ceiling. One dream repeated. I was in our attic, crawling toward a sound. A soft humming. Her humming. But in the dream, it wasn't coming from Marla. It was coming from under her, like something was using her vocal cords as a tunnel. I didn't tell anyone. Who would I even tell? My friends are casual, my family distant, and Marla. Well, Marla had stopped pretending. She still smiled, made tea, washed dishes. All the motions of normalcy, but the gaps were growing. She no longer checked her reflection. She avoided mirrors like they owed her something. And the weirdest thing, she started walking without making sound. Not quiet, silent. Her footsteps used to creak our old wood floors like anyone else's. Now, nothing. Not a single board complained when she passed. It was as if the house welcomed her weight. Last night, I decided to search her old sewing chest in the garage. She hadn't used it in years. The lid had a thick layer of dust and 3 dead spiders. Under the fabric swatches and in used needles, I found something flat wrapped in parchment paper, sealed with wax. It cracked when I peeled it open. Inside was a leather journal, worn to the point of near decay. Its surface felt wrong, too smooth, too warm. The kind of texture your brain mistakes for skin before you convince yourself it's not. No title, no name, just a single ribbon tucked halfway through the pages. I opened it. The first thing I saw was a drawing. Charcoal, or maybe old ink. A house that looked exactly like ours. Same windows, same roof, same strange leaning tree outside the kitchen. But the foundation of it was different. It extended downward like roots. No floor plan, just dozens of staircases going underground, each branching off into pitch black. At the bottom, something scribbled in jagged handwriting. Where they listen. I flipped the page. What followed was a journal entry, written by someone claiming to be a man named Calder who lived in our house before us. I had never heard that name during closing. The entry was dated 1992, but the paper felt older. Day 38. She returned from the trip, but didn't come through the front door. She appeared in the hallway mirror. I never saw her cross the threshold. I asked her how the drive was. She said there were no roads this time. I thought it was a joke, but she hasn't blinked in 4 days. I counted. She stares into the fireplace even when there's nothing lit. Something is feeding when she does that. I can feel it breathing in the flue. The entry ended there. I flipped another page. This one had no date, no handwriting I recognized. The lines were curved, spiraling into themselves. But as I stared, the page began to change. I swear to you, it rewrote itself while I was holding it. The spirals flattened into text. You shouldn't be reading this yet. She knows when you read. She hears your eyes move. I slammed the book shut. The second I did, I heard a sound behind me, sharp, delicate, like fingernails tapping lightly on glass. But there was no glass in the garage. When I turned around, the light bulb in the ceiling flickered once and blew. Everything went dark. I froze, still clutching the journal, breathing through my teeth. Then I heard it, humming, from behind the garage door. Not the humming I'd come to know, not the sleepwalking, tea-making hum. This was deeper, like something old trying to remember a song it never wrote. I didn't move until morning. When I came inside, Marla was waiting for me in the kitchen. The journal was gone from my hands. She was already holding it. I forgot this was out there, she said softly, placing it on the table. Thanks for bringing it back. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Then she pushed a piece of paper across the table toward me. A new list. It wasn't in my handwriting, but it was my notebook, my pen, and it was written with the same shaking lines I'd seen in the attic dream. Do not go back to the mirror hallway. Do not look directly at the basement door after midnight. Do not say your name out loud. And do not, under any circumstance, open the attic. But here's the thing. We don't have an attic. At least, we didn't yesterday. The human mind is surprisingly good at denial. Even when you're staring directly at something that shouldn't exist, your brain will try to stitch together an excuse. Maybe the light is different. Maybe you just never noticed it. Maybe it's been there all along, and you've somehow just walked past it 1,000 times. That's what I told myself the first time I saw the attic door. It was at the top of the stairs, right above the second landing. A small, square door flush with the ceiling, with a pull string dangling like a noose. I stood under it for 10 full minutes, just looking. It wasn't there 2 days ago. Our home inspector had checked for an attic during the walkthrough. There was no entry, no crawl space, no mention of one in the blueprints I requested last year when we thought about adding solar panels. But now there it was, sitting there like it had always belonged. I didn't say anything to Marla. Lately, I'd started speaking less and less. Not out of fear, exactly, more like strategy. I was convinced the house was listening. Not the walls, not the vents, not even her. Just the house. Sometimes I'd whisper something in the living room and hear the exact same phrase echo faintly in the garage 12 minutes later. One night I said, "I don't think I'm safe here," under my breath while washing dishes. 10 minutes later, the radio in the guest room turned on by itself and played a song called "Nowhere to Run." It was like I was being mocked by an intelligence I couldn't see, not aggressive, just amused. But the attic door was different. It didn't mock me. It didn't blink or breathe or hum. It just waited. That night I dreamed about it. In the dream, I stood on the ladder reaching up, pulling the string. As the door opened, something fell out. Not a person, not an object, just a sound. A deep, groaning tone that vibrated the walls and made the air feel sticky. Marla stood behind me in the dream, smiling with her head tilted too far. "Don't go up until you've forgotten who you are," she whispered. "Names don't belong up there." I woke up at 4:11 a.m., drenched in sweat, and realized I was already standing at the bottom of the stairs. I had no memory of getting out of bed. No pillow, no blanket. Just my bare feet on cold wood, and the attic string swinging ever so slightly, as if someone had just touched it. At 7 a.m., I called in sick. My job had stopped matching weeks ago. I couldn't focus on emails or project timelines when my house was clearly rewriting itself every night. I spent the morning in the basement digging through old boxes, looking for anything that showed there used to be an attic. Photos, notes, renovation records. Instead, I found something worse. At the very bottom of a water-damaged cardboard box labeled Zmaz Decor, wedged beneath broken ornaments and a cracked snow globe, was a VHS tape with no label. I haven't owned a VHS player in years, but I knew someone who did. My neighbor, Clark, 2 doors down. Retired, barely uses his phone, the kind of guy who still gets DVDs from the library and bakes bread every Sunday. I told him I found a funny old home video I wanted to check out. He didn't ask questions. I sat in his garage, surrounded by the smell of motor oil and sourdough, and watched. The footage was grainy, time-stamped March 8, 1993. The living room was unmistakably ours. Same wallpaper, same fireplace, same cracked corner tile. A woman stood in the center of the room, alone. She looked confused. Her hands trembled. In the background, something was ticking like a metronome. Then she said a name, "Henry?" I leaned forward. My chest went cold. The woman on the tape repeated it. "Henry, are you watching?" But it wasn't my mother. It wasn't Marla. It was someone I had never seen before, but she said my name like she'd known me for years. Then the camera tilted. It shook violently, as if something had grabbed the camcorder, and the last thing visible before static swallowed the screen was a flash, not of a face, not exactly, but of teeth. Not smiling. Just there. Close. Wide. Wrong. Clark asked if I was okay. I said I was fine and left without taking the tape. When I got home, Marla was sitting at the top of the stairs beneath the attic door, staring up at it. "I think we should open it together," she said without turning around. Her voice was completely calm, but I could tell something in her body had changed. The way she held her hands in her lap, the way her spine aligned too perfectly with the wall behind her, like she was being puppet from the inside. I lied. I told her I had a headache, that I needed to lie down. She didn't argue. When I finally stepped into the bedroom, I saw something on my pillow. A folded sheet of paper. No handwriting. Just printed text in black ink. "You've been in longer than you remember." She came back on day 3. "This is day 61. You never made it out of the hallway. You still think you did." I dropped the note. My hands started shaking uncontrollably. I looked out the window. The street was empty. The trees were frozen, not swaying, not moving, just frozen in mid-bend, like a paused video. And from upstairs, behind the closed attic door, I heard a knock. Once, then twice. Then something whispered my name in a voice that sounded like mine, but just slightly off. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even try. I sat in the corner of the living room with the lights off, the folded note still in my hand, and watched the staircase from a distance like it was going to move. I kept thinking about the line, "You never made it out of the hallway." That kept replaying in my head like a broken tape loop. What hallway? When? And if I hadn't made it out, where the hell was I now? Who had been doing my laundry? Paying bills? Smiling politely at our neighbor when she brought over banana bread last week. By the time the sun came up, or what looked like sunlight, because even that felt wrong lately, I knew I was going to open the attic. Not out of courage, not out of curiosity, but because I didn't believe I was awake anymore. Nothing around me felt real. The street outside looked like a still image. Marla had stopped blinking again. The fireplace, which hadn't been used in months, was warm to the touch. The mirrors, every single one, showed my reflection with a half-second delay. I tested it, moved my hand, blinked, tilted my head, and the version of me in the glass always lagged behind, just slightly. I waited until Marla went into the garden, humming as she trimmed plants we didn't plant. I watched her from the upstairs window as she dug her fingers into the dirt and pulled something out that looked suspiciously like a strip of wet cloth. She smiled as she pocketed it. I didn't ask. Instead, I pulled down the attic ladder. The wood creaked like it had been waiting. I climbed slowly, my hands shaking harder with each rung. The air changed around me. Denser. Heavier. It smelled like warm copper and mildew. I had to duck my head as I pushed through the square opening, and for a second I was blind, complete darkness. Then something clicked. Not a light switch. Not anything electrical. Just a shift in the dark. And the space began to reveal itself. The attic was massive. Too massive. The roof of our house should have capped the space at maybe 4 feet in height, enough for some boxes and insulation. But this was a cathedral of shadows. The floor stretched out endlessly. Pillars rose into black nothing. The only light came from behind me, where the square opening cast a weak yellow glow, a glow that seemed to dim as I stepped forward. That's when I saw it. Me. Not a mirror. Not a hallucination. A man stood 20 feet away, facing the other direction, hands by his side. Same build. Same posture. Same clothes I was wearing yesterday. The dark flannel shirt with the bleach stain on the sleeve. He didn't move. He didn't breathe. Just stood there like he was waiting for permission. I called out, "Hello." He didn't turn. I stepped forward. He stepped forward at the same time. I froze. So did he. I stepped left. He stepped left. It wasn't a mirror. There was no reflection. I was looking at his back, and he was mimicking me in reverse. I whispered, "Who are you?" And that's when he turned around. His face wasn't mine. Not exactly. It was close, but off, like a wax figure sculpted by someone working off memory. The smile was too wide. The eyes were glassy. And when he opened his mouth, he spoke in my voice, but it was a version of my voice I hadn't heard in years. Younger. Confident. The version I used to hear in recordings back when I still liked myself. "You're late," he said. I backed up instinctively, but the attic didn't let me. The space behind me shrank. Literally shrank. I turned and the hatch was gone. The ladder, the light, all of it, gone. Replaced by another column of black air. He kept smiling. "I kept it all running while you hid down there," he said, and stepped forward. "She needed a version of you that didn't ask questions." My stomach dropped. "What are you talking about?" I said, my voice cracking. "She brought me back because you wouldn't come upstairs. You stayed in the hallway. You closed your eyes when the door appeared. You pretended." He stepped even closer, and I saw that his arms weren't quite right. Too long. The joints bent slightly off. His shirt didn't have sleeves. It was stitched into his skin. "I've been keeping her happy," he whispered. "And she's been keeping the rest of them out." I turned to run. The only direction left. Into the dark. I ran until my legs screamed, until my lungs burned, until I couldn't hear anything but my own heartbeat. And then I fell. Flat. Hard. Back into my own bed. No attic. No ladder. No alternate self. Just me. Face down on the covers, sweating, gasping. But something had followed me. On the nightstand, next to the glass of water I hadn't poured, was a new note. Short. Neat. "You've met the better version. He will be taking your place soon. Please do not resist." For a while, I didn't know if I was awake. That morning felt like every other. The coffee pot still gurgled. The floor still creaked in the same pattern down the hall. The light coming in through the blinds still fell across the couch in soft golden stripes. But none of it felt mine. Not anymore. It was like the house had memorized what life should feel like, and now it was performing it for me, like a stage play for an audience of one. Marla was in the kitchen. She was making pancakes, whistling, cheerful. Her robe flowed behind her like nothing had happened, like we hadn't spent weeks, maybe months, trapped in this fractured version of our lives. She looked up at me as I entered and smiled like it was any other Sunday. "You slept well?" she said. I didn't answer. Instead, I sat down at the table and stared at her. "Where is he?" I asked. She didn't pretend not to understand. "Gone," she said, flipping a pancake with a grace that made me ache. "He served his purpose. You're ready now." "I'm not," I whispered. "You are," she replied. "You came up the stairs." That's all I'd ever asked. "What was it?" I asked. "That place. The other me. The lists. The voices." She looked down at the pan for a long moment, then back at me. Her eyes were the clearest I'd seen in weeks. "This house isn't haunted," she said. "It's protective. It bends for whoever lives in it. But when one of you starts drifting, forgetting yourself, your name, your reasons, it has to choose which version it will keep. You let go too long, Henry. You stop being here. It made space for someone else." "And you?" I asked. "Who are you really?" "I'm your wife," she said. "But I'm also the one who stayed awake while you sleepwalked through everything. I knew you were gone before the house did. I just didn't know if you'd come back." Something shifted in me. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't feel like a lightning bolt or some big emotional breakthrough. It just felt like warmth, like blood returning to a limb that had gone numb for too long. I looked at her, really looked, and realized how long it had been since I'd done that. She was tired, and brave, and still holding on. "I'm here," I said, and I meant it. "I'm sorry I left." She smiled again, and this time it wasn't eerie or tight or practiced. It was tired and real and enough to break me. She came over, placed the plate in front of me, and touched the side of my face. "You came back," she said. The next few days were quiet. The house seemed to exhale. The humming stopped. The attic door gone. Just a smooth ceiling now, like it had never been touched. The mirrors reflected normally. The hallway had 12 steps again. I counted. Twice. That weekend, we drove to the coast. Just the two of us and Thomas, our dog, who had returned to his old self, barking at clouds, sleeping in the car's seat, licking my ear like I hadn't scared him half to death for a month. We stayed in a rental cabin. I read while she sketched. We sat in silence a lot, but it wasn't the heavy silence from before. This was the kind of silence that says, "You're still here." The kind that doesn't need filling. On our last night, I asked her something I'd been scared to bring up. What would have happened if I hadn't come up the stairs? She didn't answer for a long time. Then she said, "Then I'd have lived with the other you. But I would have missed you every single day." That night, I slept deeper than I had in years. When we got home, everything was still. No new doors. No whispering. Just us. And it was enough.